So, the new Supergirl movie hasn't even come out yet, but it's already at the heart of a huge controversy. And honestly, it all started with a single comment from its star that just blew up the internet. Today, we're going to break down a major critical argument that's been gaining steam and really look at why this film is facing so much backlash. And this right here, this is the quote that kicked the whole thing off. It's from the lead actress, Millie Alcock. When she was asked about some of the early chatter around the film, she suggested the criticism was really about this ownership of women's bodies. And that statement? Whoa. It immediately split the online conversation right down the middle, and it became the flashpoint for a way bigger debate. So that really brings us to the big question we're digging into. Is what Millie Alcock said a totally fair defense against sexist criticism? Or is there something else going on? Is this maybe part of a calculated PR move to get ahead of other problems with the film? All right, let's start by exploring that second idea. The critics we're looking at are saying these comments aren't just some random off-the-cuff remark. Nope, they see it as a move from a very familiar public relations playbook. So, what exactly is this so-called defense playbook? Well, it's a term critics use to describe a PR tactic they've seen pop up again and again. The idea is that the people involved in a movie basically suggest that any negative reviews or fan backlash are going to be because of bigotry or sexism, not because the movie itself might have problems. It's like they're trying to shut down criticism before it can even get started. Now, this slide is where the argument gets really interesting. On the left, critics point to actresses they claim used this playbook and ended up facing a ton of fan backlash. But on the right, you've got actresses in similar superhero roles who got tons of praise, seemingly without ever using this kind of defensive tactic. The whole point being made here is that this approach could be a huge factor in how fans end up feeling about the project. And here's the bottom line. According to this point of view, this strategy just doesn't work. In fact, it backfires. The argument is that audiences really don't like being told that if they don't like a movie, it's because they're bad people. So instead of helping sell tickets, this guilt tripping just pushes the core audience away and can even hurt an actor's reputation in the long run. But here's the thing. The critics say this whole PR playbook isn't even the real issue. It's just a distraction. The bigger problem, they argue, is the movie's entire take on who Supergirl is as a character. And wow, this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the Supergirl most of us know, hopeful, positive, a real symbol of light. But on the other side, you've got the version from the Woman of Tomorrow comic that this movie is based on. And that version is described as jaded, depressed, self-destructive, just completely wallowing in trauma. It's a fundamentally different, way darker character. Yeah, the critics we're looking at, they do not mince words about the comic this movie is based on. They call it disgusting dystopian garbage. The argument is that it was a story that maybe some critics liked, but regular comic book readers just didn't connect with. So from their perspective, the problems with this movie started way back when they decided to adapt this specific dark and depressing storyline. When you boil it all down, the argument is that the one thing, the most important part of Supergirl, is just gone. That classic defining trait of hers, that sense of hopeful optimism, is nowhere to be found, they say. Instead, the character just comes off as, well, depressed. And then there's this other kind of awkward point being raised. It's about this perceived disconnect between the actress looking so young and the character's behavior. The argument is that when you show a character who looks like she's maybe 14 years old, engaging in heavy drinking and what they call debauchery, it just creates a really uncomfortable, jarring feeling for the audience. It just doesn't work. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because the argument here is that the problems with Supergirl aren't just about Supergirl. Critics see it as a symptom of a much bigger issue with the entire creative direction of the new DC cinematic universe. Right, so you can't just look at this one movie in a vacuum. It's being presented as Exhibit A in a case against the whole creative vision for the DCU, led by James Gunn. And the critics making this case believe that vision is fundamentally flawed and on a path to alienate the very fans it needs to win over. So what's the big beef with the new DCU? Well, it really comes down to the overall tone. The claim is that it's deliberately not family-friendly, that it's leaning hard into R-rated and what they call perverted content. They point to shows like Peacemaker and Creature Commandos as proof that this creative direction is designed for a much smaller, niche audience, and it's missing out on creating that special time for families vibe that made the early Marvel movies such a massive success. And you know, this next quote really just cuts right to the heart of their entire argument.
They're basically saying that James Gunn isn't trying to build a superhero universe for everyone, for families. He's building it for himself and for people who share his specific, edgy, adult-focused tastes.
So you take all of this, the PR stuff, the character changes, the entire DCU direction, and it leads these critics to a pretty bold and, frankly, pretty grim prediction for this movie.
First, let's just talk about the money involved. We're looking at a rumored production budget of $180 million, a massive number, and that's not even counting marketing costs. For a movie like this to even break even, let alone be a hit, it has to make a gigantic amount of money at the box office worldwide.
And as if that wasn't enough pressure, there are also these rumors swirling around about the test screenings. And the word is, they've been terrible. Now, the argument goes that if the diehard fans who see these early cuts are impressed, that is a really, really bad sign for its chances with the general public. So, putting it all together, here's the final prediction from this side of the argument. They're forecasting a miserable failure. They're saying it's going to do so badly that it will actually make the last Superman movie, which was considered a disappointment, look like a raging success in comparison. That is a brutal prediction.
Which, of course, brings up a huge, huge question for the entire franchise. I mean, if these critics are right and this movie really does bomb, what happens then? What on earth does that mean for the future of DC movies?
And look, the stakes here are about as high as they get. The claim is that another big-budget flop could actually lead to James Gunn being removed as the head of DC Studios. And if that happens, his whole plan, his entire interconnected universe, could just fall apart. So when you look at it from this perspective, the controversy around Supergirl isn't really just about one movie. It's become a test, a referendum on the entire future of the DCU.